Let's get started, however, by reimagining education and looking a little bit more about how we build for national development. Joining us so far this morning is Randy Eastman, who's a teacher, who's also part of the planning committee for Education Month, and Akil Eiffel, a principal of the Eiffel School. Good morning to you, gentlemen.
Hey, good morning.
Thank you so much for coming through again, and hopefully we'll be joined by Dr. Denise Charles, who is an education officer with the Ministry of Education. Now, Akil, let's start with you, because as I hinted last time, I want to look at different abilities and being able to create this space where people have different interests in education. How does our education system mold itself to respond to those? At your school, if a child presents with a learning deficiency or has a passion for different areas other than the strict math and English and so forth, how do you accommodate it? How do you identify that, and how do you accommodate it?
Okay, good morning, everyone. That's a very good question. So the first thing usually we try to do in the interview phase is to find out what are some of the things a child may like. Now, sometimes you're not always able to get the answer right away. You would realize that maybe you are in physical education and you realize the student catches the ball a particular way, they hit the ball a particular way, or they may say something. And that is why teachers speaking to students is very important, especially parents as well. You need to find out what it is that your child likes to do. And one of the things that we say all the time is exposure. You can't know something if you don't expose the child to it. So in our program, we have a wide range of things we do at the Eiffel School. We try to see if the child likes any sort of physical activity, if they like theater, music, dance, that sort of stuff. And then you expose them to it. Now, let's take the average student. When I was at school, I wasn't much of a musician, but Randy was a boss musician, right? And I liked the arts, and I had a teacher that could, help to groom me towards the arts. If we don't have the specialists maybe we had students, for example, who wanted to play chess. I am not a chess player. So we brought in a chess coach, Antonio. Antonio worked with the students. They did some of the competitions. The same thing happened with drafts. And when it comes to business, those are things that, I can help with, or maybe if it's the arts or something like that. So first thing you have to do is to expose. If you're reimagining education, children at various ages, at different levels, let's say you're in A plus B, you should be able to do a certain set of skills, maybe 6 skills, or be exposed to them. Then you get to class 2, you're exposed to a different set of skills. So by the time you're ready to leave primary school, you would have had an idea for what you like, what you want to do, what you want to try, and then you go into secondary school, you can continue that, or you can learn a new skill. So at our school, we exposure is the main thing, and if we can't have it from our source pool at the school, you just bring in somebody.
Indeed. And this somebody will be like a Randy Eastman who has a passion for creative arts as well. Randy, when this child comes to you, the child wants to be like everyone else. That's one step. The child also might have an interest in dance, music, whatever. But how do you get that child now? How do you, Randy, as a teacher, identify the child who is taking it a little bit more seriously than the others, and then create the space for that child to actually achieve what it's passionate about?
I think children actually develop naturally, and you have to allow for a creative space, whether it's music, dance, any discipline within the arts. You allow for an open space, you allow for an open forum, allow them to express themselves in whatever ways, because most times children who excel in the arts are capable in more than one area, and it's a case of allowing them to shine in that particular area, or all of them, as a matter of fact, allowing them to see the possibilities of a lucrative career within the arts, whether it be music, dance, drama, etc. You let them know that this is a possibility. You are showing exceptional skill in this particular area, and I do believe that you can make a lucrative living from it. And you chart a path. You say, hey, this is what you're going to need to do. You're going to have to qualify yourself further. You're going to have to get to understand the business of the arts, specifically if it's sports, education, whatever discipline it is, doesn't matter. The application is the same. Your qualifications, and then from there, establishing yourself as a business, understanding yourself as a brand, and further developing your craft in the particular area.
Through. But at what stage in the primary level, for instance, do you have that conversation with a child who's very keen on doing such?
I think as early as possibly like 7 to 8 years old. I think children kind of have a feel for what they want to do. The career path may change along the way, but I don't see an issue with introducing basic jargon and terminology for the various disciplines that a child may show interest in. It is how you differ down the wording, how you differ down the technology and explain it to them, explain the possibility of the scope, etc. So I would say from as early as 7 years old, 8 years old, children generally have a good understanding or a general understanding of where they want to go, and they're willing to get focused from it from that age.
Yes, she's late to class. Dr. Denise Charles, Education Officer. Dr. Charles, good morning to you. You are going to get 100 lines. I shall not be late again. Dr. Charles, good morning.
Technical glitch.
That's my excuse when I had my first intention too. It was a technical glitch. That's all right. But it's good to have you. We're looking at those the opportunities through education, formal education, for children who express a little differently, who have a passion for the arts, or who have other learning deficiencies. And I want to look at that learning deficiency one with you, because you know there's a body of people, Down syndrome children, for instance, who cannot fit into traditional school, but who also can express in different ways. There are children who are blind, they're deaf, and they are somehow shunted away. Do you get the sense that the education system is crafted to fit them too?
Pearson, I think today we are definitely moving towards inclusive education, and this is something that hasn't just started, but really was the theme of our education from education reform back in 2000, the late 1990s to 2000, when we had quality education for all. And I think education jurisdictions the world over are definitely moving towards more inclusive school environments. But when you speak of children with challenges, there are a range of challenges that students may have. We have students with learning disabilities, we have students with behavioral disorders, we have students with emotional disorders, we have students with conduct disorders. And while we do have that wide spectrum of challenging behaviors from some students or learning deficiencies from some students, our education system has to continue to be able to configure itself so that all of the needs of our various constituents can be met. So as you rightfully said, there are special schools for students with hearing impairments, or those who are deaf, as they prefer to be called today, those with various levels of visual impairments, etc. But we all know that a child's intelligence or a child's ability to learn is not impacted by the fact that he or she may not be able to hear, or by the fact that he or she may not be able to see. And there are examples in our system where students with these challenges have been integrated in a regular school. I witnessed this myself when I was a teacher, where there were 2 or 3 students with hearing impairments who could not hear. Actually, they were deaf. And they had a special peripatetic teacher assigned to them who would sign for them right through from assembly to every single class. That teacher would accompany that child to the class. And we also know of the examples of those who were blind who went right through and were able to accomplish degrees, etc. So there are no limits really. I think it's just a matter of expanding what we currently do so that more and more students who have various challenges can access education. The access is there. It's just a matter of sometimes even changing the mindsets of those in the public, because people need to understand that having a particular impairment does not preclude you from understanding, or does not preclude you from making a valuable contribution to your nation. And at the level of what we would see as the regular school, within a classroom, one can have various numbers of challenges among students, but yet those students can be catered to because the teachers are trained to diversify instruction, and that is what we expect our teachers to be doing.
I'm so glad you mentioned all of that, because we're going to take a break here, but when we come back, I want to look at assessment across the board and creating assessments where each child with different abilities can be equally assessed and have opportunities that are almost equal one with the other. We're going to take the break. When we come back, we'll look at that in just a moment here on Morning Barbados.
Morning, morning, morning. Good morning. Good morning to you. Good morning to you.
60 minutes now to go to the hour of 7 o'clock. We're looking at education, reimagining it, teaching, learning for national development in the 21st century. With me is Education Officer Dr. Denise Charles, Akil Eiffel, who's the principal of the Eiffel School, and Randy Eastman, who is a peripatetic teacher. I hate that word, but he's a teacher with the Ministry of Education. When we broke, I wanted to continue by looking at assessment, because oftentimes it feels as though every child, regardless of its ability, does the same test. And I just wonder, first of all, Akil, how do you deal with testing and assessments at your school before I open it up to the others?
Okay, no problem. Let me just start by saying this is one of the most controversial topics you can ever talk about. Because assessment is not something that, especially at a national level, that you can just please everybody. There will be a lot of people, that will not be happy with what you do. And obviously, that is one of the reasons why you decided to open my own school, so you can do things a little differently. Assessment ranges. There's certain things you have to do, mandated obviously by the ministry. There are criterion reference tests. But we like to test our students too individually based on skill sets they have. So for example, I'm glad you started out by asking that too, because we're looking at going into journalism and mass communications in secondary school. Now, how are we going to assess a student who wants to be a host? And yes, Pearson, there are students that want to Morning Barbados that want to be presenters and announcers. Some want to be DJs, some want to be radio hosts, etc. So how do you assess a student who's doing a program like that? Now, obviously, that's more of a practical subject. So you have to have some sort of practical assessment. Give them a miniature show to run, to do, grade it. But the most important thing is the criteria. And I think that sometimes in terms of what you're going to do, you have to look and see what is the objective. So we do a range of regular tests, standardized tests, get into class 3, class 4. But in secondary school, in our secondary program, is a little different. We have different tests. You have cricket. There are volleyball tests at the Irish school where you have to be able to hit the ball, pass the ball, things like that. But I guess that is because of the sports background. And it will vary from school to school, but the ministry has a wide range of assessments that they use. And I know that Dr. Charles can speak a lot on that.
Well, come first to Randy. Randy, because you deal with the arts, and oftentimes people just cast an eyebrow at the arts. But I know there's a lot of work that has already been done to move the arts forward and assessing people and creating opportunities for them to excel. So is it a fair playing ground for those who are passionate about the arts?
That's a funny question to answer, Pearson. And a whole answer, I'll say that persons who are geared towards the arts or have an affinity towards the arts are, I don't know, they express or they show what we call multiple intelligences. To say whether there's a fair playing field, like I said, it's difficult to answer. However, what I will say is that the teachers and the educators within the area of the arts ensure that those students are assessed in those particular intelligences fairly. You have cumulative assessments. You have the advent of the CBQ program now, which caters to things like theater arts, music production, as Akil mentioned, being a host, DJing. When it was at Parkinson Memorial School, some of the teachers there termed the things that I would do there the alternate curriculum. Right now we have Mr. Ian Webster, Myron Clark, and Sheldon Hope incorporating DJing into the curriculum. So I really think it's at a school level. It's at a curriculum level within the school, and based on what that particular school offers to students. I think the more we expose students to education or varying topics across the education sphere, you give them a better chance and a better understanding, a better opportunity to make choices for what career they want to choose. And the more exposure, again, the greater opportunity for choices.
I think these children exist in a fantastic age. I didn't have all of these opportunities in my youth, but Dr. Charles, assessment from the Ministry of Education's perspective now, do you get the sense that, go ahead.
Okay, I wanted to say that assessment is critical and germane to teaching. We cannot teach without assessing. And sometimes when we think of assessment, we're only thinking of the big day tests. But we need to understand that formative assessment is a critical part of the teacher's practice as an educator. You have to assess what you have taught so that you can determine where you need to go next or whether you need to reteach a particular concept. So every discipline involves assessing the student. And you're assessing the student on a day-to-day basis. You're assessing the student at the end of a unit. You must be able to say, well, I moved this student or I moved this class from point A to point B to point C. And if you're dissatisfied with where the student has gone, then you need to go over it as a teacher. So this is critical and really a basic fundamental of teaching. What I can say is that in every domain, including the arts, students must be assessed to be able to judge their skills, whether or not they are singing the way you want them to sing, because voice is also an instrument, whether they're playing the instrument in the way that you decided that the competency that you want to assess, whether they're drawing or dancing or acting in a particular way. So regardless of the subject matter, all students require assessment, and then there are different types of assessment. So while you will do the formative assessment as a matter of course in terms of your teaching, then there's a type of diagnostic test that you would do to assess where a student may be. Maybe students who are entering a school for the first time, or they're entering a form level for the first time, the teachers would want to evaluate where that child is so that they know best how to plan for them. That is also a different type of assessment, because you want to see where the deficits may be, where the challenges may be, and where you may need to apply some more attention in terms of how you plan for learning. So assessment is really critical to education across the system, and I think we need to understand that teachers have it within their power to really diversify what they do in class. When I was a teacher, I taught English, and when I was a teacher, I would be assessing students in writing, and they would write for me. They would formally write. When I give them a topic, they would also do something called free writing, where they were allowed to explore and write on whatever they wanted to write. They would supplement their writing with drawings. I would have them sing and discuss a theme from literature, etc. So I applied a number of strategies to assist my students, because I recognized that there were multiple learning styles within my class. So it is not just about recognizing multiple intelligences in terms of how a student is quote unquote smart, but also it is about understanding the various learning styles and applying that to how we teach, and also utilizing that within our assessments. So even within the context of formative assessment, if a teacher can allow a child to get up and speak and share how they feel about a particular theme or how they feel about a particular poem, there's nothing wrong with stopping that teacher from assigning a grade to an oral test. Yes, at the level of CXC and at the level of the promotion exam, the exams will go back to the traditional format, but they will be buttressed by what has been done at the level of the classroom. And when the child is experiencing success at the level of the class, then that success is likely to transfer into a more formal type of test. And then when the teacher is evaluating the child's performance at the end of the year, he or she has both of those types of assessment to look at.
I agree with you on the oral test, but there are some students who will not be able to do the traditional tests. And I can use what oh Lord, I didn't want to braid up. I have a godson who has Down syndrome. And obviously, he is not going to be the one who is going to sit on there and write for you every answer on a piece of paper. But his level of comprehension astounds me. And his ability to be able to respond correctly amazes me. And I'm just saying, for a child like that, it feels sometimes as though the system is so unfair, because the level of assessment given to him is going to be, in my opinion, personal again, unfair.
Well, Pearson, there are adjustments given for students who have been diagnosed and have what we call been statemented. If there is an official letter from an educational psychologist or a doctor which suggests that this child has a specific learning deficiency, then that child is allowed extra time in national exams, and that includes the common entrance, that includes CXC or any other examining body. That child is allowed extra time to be able to work on his or her questions. So that's standard, and that should also happen at the level of the school, where for promotion exams, which happen yearly, the students are allowed extra time. But as I said, when we take the entire picture into consideration, where each child is concerned, and we're looking at the fact that each one matters, and we want to develop quality education for all, then that level of attention that you're speaking of must start at the level of the classroom. And we must not only see assessment as a formal test, because that is not all that is included when it comes to assessment in education. It is what the teacher does every single day, every single week, in terms of evaluating where the students that have been assigned to that teacher, where they are going with respect to their learning.
Akila could feel he wanted to jump in. See what I tell you?
Yeah. Because Denny said something very important after the point that you made. And you know, because she started teaching English, and I still teach English now. But when I started teaching students to read. And one of the most important things in reading is something called sub-vocalization, which is you hear yourself talk when you're speaking. It's impossible to read without hearing yourself talk. So one of the things to parents, to all those parents listening, one of the most important things you can do for your child is to encourage them to speak every single day, because you're not just building confidence. And when Pearson spoke about his godson that has Down syndrome, I remembered a student who had ADHD, and normally, you know, you hear about the Ritalin and stuff, and this student was on a similar drug, and they would be very mute and quiet. But when you give them something to read, just to talk, just to hear a child want to speak or say something is so important. And I find sometimes parents, especially in this day and age, they do not encourage the children to speak. They allow them to be there. They have their tablets. They don't encourage them to talk. And one of the most important forms of communication comes down to oral communication. So allow your children to speak, let your students talk, let them engage you in a conversation. The same way how we're here having a conversation, so much comprehension is done from just listening to others speak, you know. And since a lot of students do not like to read, they like to watch movies, they like to discuss movies and games. So that's something that they do. I would tell the students, because I'm an Arsenal fan, I would say something, well, you know, Barcelona is not all this, and the students would say, but sir, Arsenal win the trophies and stuff, and this way, okay, go on and write an essay telling me what makes Cristiano Ronaldo such a good player. And you would realize that some students may write it, some may want to talk about it, and the ones that talk about it, you really see the expression, the creativity, the energy, and it goes a long way into building the confidence of students, especially boys, especially boys.
Yes. Man, she's on, Aki. You walk right into one of the areas I want to discuss as well. You know, development of confidence. This is so unfair.
Pearson,
go ahead, Dr. Charles.
If I may add, I also want to say that we have a set of competent teachers. We have teachers who have been especially trained in special needs education, teachers who are able to bring those skills to the table with respect to how they approach teaching students with special needs, because that is a discussion in itself.
Yes.
And the way that we may teach a child within what we would term a mainstream school or a mainstream classroom of mixed ability would not be the same approach that we would use with students with particular special needs. So teachers obviously need to be exposed more, because we are seeing more and more students with learning challenges in the regular classroom. That is so. But we also need that there are a set of teachers who have been trained and continue to be trained with respect to special needs education, diversifying the types of approaches. Some of their approaches are extremely creative and extremely out of the box. And then there are different assistive technologies that they can utilize to help teach students with special needs. So I just wanted to make that point, that it isn't that a cookie cutter approach is going to be used or should be used with all students, but we are aware of the levels of training among our teachers, and some of them are doing an excellent job.
I could agree with you. Randy, you wanted to say something, jump right in.
Yeah, I wanted to add to what Dr. Charles was saying, but I think she came back and made that point, but also the need for additional assessment, not only in the classroom, but when you get home, application of the knowledge that you would have learned within the class. You know, I think parents have a responsibility as well to continue the education process at home, whether it be in mathematics, the application of basic functions, addition, subtraction, multiplication, counting change when you go to the shop, those kind of things. You have to ensure that you give that child the application process in real life. Whether if it's to do with interests, as Akil said, you find the interest of the child, whether it's football, gymnastics, athletics, pique the interest of the child by engaging them in that particular area. And as Dr. Charles said, within the classroom, in terms of children with special needs, we have a lot of extremely dedicated teachers and something called differentiated learning. I know that is practiced within the classroom to ensure that the scope within the classroom or the diversity within the classroom is catered to in terms of the varying levels of cognition of the students within that class.
Well, you guys have settled my conscience, my mind a lot this morning as it relates to special needs and how we respond to them as well. So I feel a lot more confident that in the classroom, Michael is getting the very best of attention indeed, because he's in regular school, but I just want to make sure that he too is a success, and that's what's most important to me. I'm being personal in this one, but I know for a lot of parents it's the same thing as well. We have to leave it there. We have a whole month. I
course.
hope you guys will make yourselves available again soon, so we can continue. Because this whole question of confidence, and I know spoke about this last time as well. We're seeing children being a little shy, not speaking well, not being confident enough to speak into a microphone and espouse on something.
Especially
and I want to know what
boys, Pearson.
I know.
We have
I
to
know.
begin to look at our cultural practices where that is concerned.
See?
Because that is very much grounded in our culture.
And that's all part of education too. So we want to look at that next
Yes.
time we come around. All right, so listen out for the call. But thank you so much for joining us again this morning.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pierce.
Dr. Denise Charles, Akil Eiffel, and Randy Eastman. We're looking at education.